Y'all, welcome and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Morgan, and here we do a little bit of all things creepy, but what we mostly do here is some scary storytelling, and those stories, for the most part, come directly from you guys. So with that being said, if you have any stories you would like to share with me, please send them to this email address, and I will also put it below along with podcast episode links and social media links. Now that I said the word podcast out loud, I am just realizing we didn't film the episode for this week, and we planned on coming back this week. Oh no. Oh no. So that might be delayed again. Okay, in my defense, listen. It's been a time. Silence. Silence, truck outside. I have had some bad luck lately. Like, literally, okay. Within the past month, we literally had to replace our dryer. Those are not cheap, okay? And then, like, 4 days ago, our freezer broke. And we have to buy a new fridge. And those are really expensive. And my brain's just been really preoccupied with stuff. I'm supposed to go out of town to Columbus next week to film a movie. Can't go because the new fridge has taken such a, slam into my finances that I literally can't travel right now. It's not a fun time. So I forgot about the podcast. Please forgive me. But you can go watch the old episodes if you haven't seen those yet. Anyways, let's get into these stories before I ramble for a really long time. I watched your video about spiritually locking your phones, and then I had suddenly thought of something creepy that happened when I was younger. So I had this flip phone, and at one point I remember I somehow got access to deleted photos and videos or something on it. Maybe it was archived. But at first it looked like just a photo. That's how still this was. Apparently that was a video. And one I had no recollection of taking, especially since it was me and my friend at the time, but it wasn't us. Our mouths were both wide open, our faces were cracked looking. Our eyes black. It was just frozen like that for a second. Then I heard this raspy exhale type deal going on. And then a second after, it kept playing. My friend and I looked normal and were laughing like we were just having fun. I remember being so freaked out I couldn't even bring myself to watch it again. My mom couldn't explain it and also was a bit freaked out about it, as I had immediately taken my phone to her to delete it because I didn't even want to look at it again. I want to know if you had any thoughts on this. Okay, so thoughts, yes, but I also had an experience because I used to have one of those slide out phones where, okay, if I remember, I'll attach a picture, but it had a touch screen and it slid out to reveal the keyboard, and it had a camera on it, obviously. Well, my friend and I used to make these videos and voice recordings of us just messing around and stuff, and we had re-listened to this one recording literally 4 times. And on the next listen, right into the mic, something says, "What have you done?" in this raspy voice. And I remember running it into my parents, their living room, showing it to them. They didn't believe us. They thought it was us doing it, which in hindsight is weird because they knew all the paranormal activity going on in that house and still didn't believe us. But that happened. We took the phone to school and we were showing our other friends this. Anyways, I ended up finding that old phone recently and it still had the SIM card in it. So I took out the SIM card, and it's gone. The whole thing's corrupted. I know spirits use technology. That's why things like spirit talker apps and spirit boxes and things work. I'd say it's just something to do with that. It's just a way for them to communicate. But your whole face morphing on camera is something I don't love. I don't love that it had enough energy to do that. Also, side note before we get into the next story. Okay. One thing about me is I am very allergic to hay. This will all make sense. I had to go outside around hay that was being freshly cut yesterday. Or was it the day before? It was the day before yesterday. And I can't breathe. So if I sound weird, if I don't cut out all of my gasps, I can't breathe. I cannot breathe. So I am trying my best, but alright, next story. So I have 2 stories for you, one kind of creepy and the other scary. Sorry, this is kind of long. Story number 1. So I no longer live in this house, but when I did, it was just me and my dog. My partner at the time and I had split it for 2 years before this, and my girlfriend that had been living with me moved out maybe 3 months prior. Hello? Dang, trucks are loud. So one night I was in the lounge room with my dog watching TV. It was the weekend, so I smoked a bit and put on a movie. About 20 minutes into the movie, my dog started getting whiny and nudging my arm. So I lift my arm and he snuggles in. I'm giving him head scratches. I swear not even 2 minutes later he jumps up and looks down the hallway and just stares at the front door. Now all the lights in my house are off except the TV. My dog isn't usually like this, not much bothers him. He's a big dog, pit bull crossed with a staffy, but his ears were twitching like he'd heard something from the front of the house and was still hearing it. I say his name a couple of times and he ignores me, still staring at the front door. Now I'm starting to get creeped out. I'm already a little messed up, so I'm a little paranoid. So I say his name again a little louder, and with more authority. His head snaps to the side and looks at me, then straight back to the door. To be honest, I think my dog was just being a little brat because he wanted more attention than I was giving him at the time. But then he barked. My very, very rarely barking dog barked, so now I'm creeped out. I give him another head rub to try and calm him down. Then from the corner of my eye, I see something move, stop, and then move again. More creeped out now, I get up to see what it is. It's a damn frog. Small brown tree frogs that are common in my area. Second story. My ex and I had moved out into our first place together, and we'd been there for 6 months when I had the most horrifying nightmare I've ever had. I woke up in a panic and checked my ex, still fast asleep. Then this wave that I can only describe as pure evil filled the room. I looked up over at the bathroom door, and there was this tall shadowy figure with no eyes and a wide open mouth just staring at me. I let out the loudest, most blood-curdling, involuntary scream, and it disappeared. Woke my ex up from a dead sleep, though. Never happened again. The tree frog one was such a nice palate cleanser. I wish I had stuck that at the end of, the last video that you guys watched, because those stories were rough, and I could have used a laugh. Alright, next story. My husband and I had just had our oldest son, and he was only a few months old. It was his second night sleeping in his nursery. It's important to know that my father-in-law lived in the basement. One night we put our son to bed and laid him in the crib in the nursery. We get into bed ourselves, our room is right next to his. We lay down and shut off our TV, and we hear what sounds clear as day like footsteps from the basement stairs through the kitchen and through the hall. The steps go all the way to our bedroom door, which was open. We both sit up thinking it's my father-in-law, but no one's there. We look at each other, and my husband was convinced that someone was in our house. He gets out of bed and checks on our son, checks his room and every single room and closet and window in our house. No one's there. We get back into bed and we lay there, and we hear our son scream/cry loudly. His bedroom door slams. We run to the room, and I was able to open the door right away and grab him out of his crib. We all sleep in our room for the next few nights. A few days later, we're eating dinner, and I was taking a video of my son eating a donut. On that video, you hear whistling and whispering in the video, like it's right next to the phone. We moved out 2 weeks later. The crazy part of all this was the house number address was 1666. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but it sure scared the crap out of us. The last week, a dark figure had been walking past myself and my children, and my 3-year-old won't sleep. Now, I don't know what to do. This thing has made itself known in so many ways, such as walking around, moving doors and lights, and making sounds and noises, or mocking our toddler. Now it's showing itself way more. So, you said you moved out. Is this happening in the new house? And if so, I would recommend a cleansing for sure. Hopefully that calms things down. Do them regularly. And if not, you might need to do a banishment because that sounds very attachment-esque. But all of that rides on the fact of if this is happening in the new house or not. Because what worries me is if the thing that's in the last house followed you, that's more of an attachment, it sounds like. And they're a little bit harder to get rid of. But hopefully cleansing works. Okay, that's all that I'm going to film talking about during this video, but I do have a TikTok that I want to attach of stories that were sent in to me that I read, and that video is pretty long, so I wanted to leave enough room for it. But anyways, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you tomorrow. Please stay and watch that video, though. Bye. Today, I'm going to read you guys some stories, and warning, some of these are actually horrific, and I don't think you should watch this at night for that reason, especially the first one. The Boy in the Chicken Coop, my mother's story. When my mom was a young girl, she lived with my grandparents deep in the woods near the top of the mountain. The chicken coop was a ways away from the house since my grandmother was very terrified of chickens. My mom went out one night to check for eggs, and she saw what she thought was a young boy standing near the coop. But when she got close, she saw that he was completely made of shadows. After a moment, he turned around, and she could see the loose shape of an open mouth as it let out an inhuman shriek. Years later, she learned that there was at one point a young boy who lost his life by a fire in a shack in that area. Next story. The Drowned Man, my story. When I was a young girl, around age 9, I used to go walking in the woods around my home. I grew up in a trailer in the middle of the woods, not too far from where my mom grew up, just at the bottom of that mountain in a valley. One time I came across a strange man with really long hair who was entirely nude. He was sopping wet with threads above his lips like they'd been stitched shut and cut open again. I know this seems extremely strange, but it's a core memory for me. I remember being completely unafraid, which was unusual. I was very anxious around other people at this age. He asked me to sit with him on a log and we talked about life and my life and the mistreatment that I was going through in particular. I don't remember much of the details, but I do remember at some point telling him that my life felt like some kind of cosmic joke. And he told me that if my life was a joke, I needed to laugh along with it if I wanted to survive it. After that, we went our separate ways, him deeper into the woods and me back to the trailer. Next story. The Golden Lady and the Man of the House. My story. This one also takes place in that trailer and happened to both my mother and I. The trailer was inhabited by the spirit of an older man who we would both see semi-translucent walking down the hall from time to time. He would call my mother's name, touch her lightly, and occasionally put a single towel in the dryer and start it. The man hated it whenever my mother had a man in the house. My parents divorced when I was 3, so I can't say if my dad ever experienced any negative effects. But at one point, a cast iron wall fixture flew off the wall and nearly hit my former stepdad. That actually happened twice, once to my former stepfather, and one to one of my mother's female friends. Interestingly, my very sweet, loves everyone dog hated both of those people. They were the only people my dog ever growled at in her life. Another one of the spirits we saw in that house we only saw looking at the house from outside. We'd usually see her through the kitchen window. She was a beautiful woman who seemed to glow with golden light. At first I thought it was my mom and a trick of the light. My mom always had light red in her hair. But I saw this golden lady even when my mom wasn't home, and my mom had seen her too. The reason I put them in one story is that we actually have a strong superstition who the man was. Before a trailer was there was a house, and a man's wife, him, there, for cheating. We aren't sure if the golden woman is related to his wife, but we have no leads on who she was or what she is. Next story. The All-Knowing Shadows. Mine and my brother's story. When I was a kid, still in the same trailer, there were 3 shadowy figures, loose in form, not like the boy my mother saw, which looked like red embers for eyes and would talk to me from the end of my bed. I can't remember what was said, but I remember that they'd answer absolutely any question I asked. Eventually I refused to speak to them and they disappeared. But my brother is 9 years younger than me, and eventually he began to start going into his closet and asking no one strange questions. His closet and my closet were right next to each other, separated only by a thin wall. I suspected he was talking to the same entities, and on a day when I was home and he was not, I went into his closet and demanded that they leave him in our house alone. I never saw my brother talking to his closet again. Next story. The Shadow Nanny. My mother and I's story. This may or may not be related to the previous story, but my mother reports that when I was a baby, when she and my father and brother and me were home for the first time, not the trailer, we spent the first 6 months of my life living in a shack that had been advertised as a chicken coop. She would sometimes see a shadow looming over me at night. Now, my mother had terrible postpartum depression that went untreated, so take this with 1 grain of salt. It's possible she may have just been hallucinating, but given the previous story about loose-form shadow creatures, it felt worth noting. Next story. Tourists and the Woods Folk. My whole household story. This one isn't supernatural, but it's horrifying. Growing up in the trailer in the woods, we often had to deal with tourists coming from the city who would come to our woods to hunt. And by hunt, I mean drink and shoot and ride 4-wheelers in locals' lawns. Our trailer was shot at on numerous occasions, one of which I remember a bullet actually going through the house. Older men would do donuts in our yard at 6 o'clock in the morning, and once when I was 12 I came out with a pew to let them know to get out of our yard. Coupled this with the fact that our back door eventually fell off of its hinges and my mother fixed it by stapling over the doorway with plastic and a blanket, it was a horrifying experience. Oh my god. I don't know if this person has a TikTok, but they do have an Instagram, and I'm going to put all of their stuff below, and I'll put it here too. Those are terrifying.